Hello, welcome to this webinar on the ERC's 2024 work programme, which was published on the 10th of July. I'm joined here by two colleagues from the ERC Executive Agency, Angela Liberatore, who's the head of our scientific department, and Jose Labastida, who's the head of our unit which supports the Scientific Council, which of course establishes the ERC work programme. This has become something of an annual tradition. I think it's the fourth or fifth time that we've been together with Angela and Jose to explain to you some of the novelties in this year's work programme and to answer any questions you may have, particularly if you're considering applying for one of our grants. So thanks very much, Angela and Jose, for being with us again. Angela and Jose will be talking about some of the novelties in the work programme, but first to recall some of the basics about ERC funding opportunities. We will again this year be offering the grants that you will be familiar with, so starting grants, consolidated grants, and advanced grants for individual principal investigators. Our synergy grants, which are open to groups of 2 to 4 principal investigators, and the proof of concept grants, which are available to existing grantees, so an additional top-up funding for those who want to develop the ideas that they've come across during their research. We have published a lot of information online already, including the calendar of the 2024 calls. So 2 of those calls are already open, the starting grants and the synergy grants, and consolidated grants as well. And the advanced grant call will be open in May 2024. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I pass over to Jose and then Angela. We're live on YouTube, and we will be collecting questions via the chat on YouTube. We'll also be keeping an idea on other social media, X, formerly known as Twitter, as well as LinkedIn. We received a couple of questions in advance, so we'll try to get through as many of those questions as we can during the webinar. But if there are some that we don't manage to get to, we'll try to provide answers in writing via the chat afterwards. And there's a lot of information online. As I said, the links have been shared in the description of today's webinar, so feel free to click through for the press release that we issued in July, the text of the work programme. There's a specific Q&A on lump sums, which we'll get to in just a moment. And we also had a special edition of our ERC magazine on research assessment. So perhaps, Jose, I could start off on this issue of research assessments. This is one of the important new developments that our Scientific Council decided to introduce in the 2024 work programme. And perhaps you could explain to our viewers exactly what that entails.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here in this new webinar to talk about the work programme. Let me start first with what has not changed, okay? That is important always to keep it in mind. The only evaluation criteria in ERC is scientific excellence, okay? What we have modified, and the Scientific Council has been working on these developments, as Tony said, over the last year, is the way the information to do this assessment is structured, the information provided by the principal investigator, as well as the guidance to the evaluators to apply this only criterion that we have to assess the proposals. So what are the changes in the structure of the information that the PIs must provide? In the past, we have a track record and a CV, the 2 separated parts. Now they are combined in a single document, combined and hopefully simplified in a single document, a document that has at most 4 pages and comes with a template that has 4 parts, okay? The first part is about personal details like education, previous positions, current positions, other key aspects. And the second part is focused on research achievements. Here, we limit up to 10 the main research achievements that the PI can highlight in this combined track record plus curriculum vitae to demonstrate what have been the contributions made to the advancement of the field of research he or she has been working previously. Also to emphasize on the more recent ones, okay? And it is requested also to include a short narrative about the importance of these achievements, the role played in these achievements, but also with a focus for the PI to demonstrate that based on these achievements has the capacity to carry out the project that is being proposed, okay? This is important to keep in mind. There is a third part that is deals with significant peer recognition. Here we are talking about prizes, fellowships, academy memberships, and there is a final part with additional information that focus on career breaks, different career paths or diverse career paths, also life events, and other significant of noteworthy contributions to the community. Here, what is intended with this part is to provide to the evaluation panel context on the way the previous achievements, the previous research, the career of the PI has been developed over the year, okay? So this is a summary of this, let's say, new structure to provide the information for the evaluation relative to the PI, okay? The other parts, the scientific proposal part didn't change, it's the same as before, okay? There is a part B1 with this limit to 5 pages description of the proposal, and then the full scientific proposal with a limit of 15 pages that is in part B2, okay? Now, about the way the only criterion that is scientific excellence is used by the panels to do their assessment, the guidance in the work program is that the panels, they should primarily focus on the proposed research project, okay? Project versus PI is primarily assessment of the research project. And which aspect of the research project is important to emphasize this? They should focus on the groundbreaking nature, on how ambitious is the project, and on the potential impact on the project. These are the 3 key elements, okay? And of course, as was in the past, the feasibility of the scientific proposal has to also be assessed by the panel. Regarding the PI part, the panel should focus on the intellectual capacity, the creativity, and the commitment of the PI, but with an important focus. And the focus is that all this should be assessed, okay, on the extent to which the PI will be able to execute the project that is proposed, okay? This is important to keep in mind. And just the final remark is that in the work program, we always list the questions that the evaluators have to address in the evaluation. That, of course, they are linked to the evaluation criterion of scientific excellence. This has been streamlined, okay? If you compare them with the previous one, making them consistent with this guidance that I just explained, okay? But recommendation when writing the proposal, keep in mind that the evaluators, they have to answer those questions, okay? So provide the most relevant information for them to answer those questions. Okay, this is a brief summary of the
Very good.
Okay.
Thanks very much, Jose, for that summary and also the practical tips. We may have questions on research assessment on some of the details, so we can come back to that later in the Q&A. But let me turn now to Angela. So there are several other new developments in the 2024 work program compared with previous years. One of the One of the important ones is the introduction of lump sums for the first time for our advanced grants call, which, as I say, will be opening in May of next year. But there have also been some changes to the structure of our evaluation panels and the creation of a new panel in the SH domain, and also some changes to the way that we run the panel evaluations, and especially how people progress from step one to step two. So that's quite a rich selection of issues, but could you talk us through those other changes in this year's work program, Angela, please?
Sure, Tony, and I will try to be short as Jose, but of course there can be questions to go a bit deeper. So lump sum, well, we did have lump sum actually in the proof of concept, but please don't consider that for advanced grant because the size is different and actually the working out of the lump sum is also a bit different. But just to say that some grantees might have that in their ears, so it's better not to base yourself, if you have a proof of concept grant, to that experience if you want to apply for an advanced grant. Now, first of all, as you said, Tony, advanced grant is May next year, so there will be plenty of time to go for further guidance. There is the frequently asked question already on our website. There will be even more guidance and clarifications coming. But what it means is that normally, until now, all the grants were done on an actual base cost. What does it mean? That you have to prove with invoices and so on that you actually incurred some cost in the conduct of research. And if you do, well, as you do, those will be reimbursed or paid, and there can be audits and all the rest to see that they were actually eligible costs and so on and so forth. In the lump sum, the logic changes completely, meaning at the beginning of the project, you will submit a proposal that has the expected budgetary envelope for the project. And if the evaluation panel considers this is right, this is what is needed to actually pursue the research, then the payment is done immediately with 80% of the budget requested. And then at the end of the period, 20% is paid. And this means also no audits, no financial audits are incurred, no timesheets are necessary. Well, we know that timesheets might be necessary for the host institution, just to say that they might not be requested for the grant. So what the applicants need to do is that they need to pay attention to the fact that in the applications for advanced grants with the lump sum model, they will need to add a bit of detail on the budgetary information, particularly with regard to the personnel cost. They will have to, disentangle how much person months is necessary for each of the, personnel categories. If they have equipment, particularly large equipments, they will have to spell out which rule for depreciation cost they used. And this is information that the panel can use to do what they always do anyhow, that is to see whether the budget requested is reasonable, in line, you can say, with the research that needs to be conducted. So that's for the lump sum. And if there are questions, we can go back to that, being short. Structure of the panels. Here I will read the titles because each word, of course, matters. So I'm not going to just go by memory. So the new panel is indeed the SH8 panel, the title being Studies of Cultures and Arts. This will include cultural studies, art history, architecture, music, performing arts, museum studies, cultural heritage, and other fields, which were previously covered by the SH5 panel, and it includes social anthropology. Cultural anthropology was already covered by SH5, so social anthropology is added from the SH3 panel. Why this? Part of it is to balance social sciences and humanities. Now there will be 4 panels for social sciences, 4 panels for humanities. The other is to create more coherence in the composition of the panels. They are all multidisciplinary panels in SH, but in this way, the extent of multidisciplinarity multidisciplinarity, which was quite huge, for example, in SH5, is reorganized. And the third, which is normally the reason why new panels have been added, is to manage quantities. SH3 and SH5 have been remaining very large panels even after the addition of the SH7 panel. This is why another one was organized. But there are also some changes in the life science panels, no change in the physical sciences and engineering panels for that community to know. In the LS3 panel, the title is now Cell Biology, Development, Stem Cells and Regeneration. The reason for this is to ensure that it's explicit that both stem cells and regeneration biology fields are addressed in this panel. In LS5, Neurosciences and Disorders of the Nervous System, the new subtitles include In Humans and All Other Organisms. We had actually a very interesting conversation about this. And this is to make explicit, for those who might not be totally clear, that when speaking about neurosciences and disorders of the nervous system, this is also in humans, not only in other organisms. So these are the changes in the panel structure. To finish with the third topic, which is the evaluation process itself, there are two important changes. One is the scoring that we have. There was already quite some discussion years ago in the Scientific Council about the fact that proposals that were getting a B at step 1 while being actually excellent were having a submission restriction.
Right.
And the question was, how do we deal with the puzzle? We cannot pass all proposals which are excellent, even with the multiplier, to step 2. So what do we do not to penalize people? So finally, squaring the circle was found with two kinds of A's. So there is one A, which is the classic A, if you like, which is if you get an A at step 1, it means the proposal is excellent, it is considered excellent, and should go to step 2 for interviews. At that point, of course, at step 2, you either get an A again, meaning good news, you're getting funded, or you are in a reserve list to get funded if one of the other proposals drops from the main list. And B means excellent, but not for funding at this stage. Now we will have at step 1 to go to step 2, the A not invited to step 2, which means the proposal is excellent, but we cannot go to step 2 for interviews. However, this means that the applicants can apply immediately the next year rather than having a resubmission restriction for 1 year. So this was done really to disentangle the assessment of quality, excellence, good, and so on, from the need, if you like, to manage quantities. Manage quantities is also the reason for the cap to interviews at 44. This is not a magic number. This is a number that was done looking at the practice. We have a maximum of 5 days of evaluation. Evaluation is on site by our panel members. We cannot ask them to stay here also during the weekend. They also need to do other things, plus travel and so on. So if you think about the initial briefing, working together, interviews, which cannot be really more than 11 or 12 every day, plus finishing off with the ranking, the comments, and so on and so forth. This is the maximum. So 44. Now, there are questions maybe about, is 44 penalizing somebody? And it has to be clear that the success rate in the panels is the same. The success rate is the same for all panels, because it's determined bottom up by the number of applications to that panel. So whether we use the multiplier to go to step 2 or whether we use a cap, the final success rate remains the same. If you like, in a large panels, you will have a better chance to go to, in a small panel, you have a better chance to go to step 2 because, maybe, in a panel with 50, you have a maximum of 44 if they are all excellent, and only if they are all excellent, they can all go to step 2. But then there will be a strong screening at step 2. If you are in a large panel, it will be tougher, maybe the selection of the 44 out of the 150, for example, proposal we have in some panels. But then the ones who are selected for interviews will have a better chance among the ones identified for interviews to get for funding. But the overall doesn't change.
Yes, yes. Okay.
I think I exhausted all the 3 topics.
Super. Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much, Angela. Jose, let me just turn back to you just to complete the picture. Can you briefly tell us how much money is available in total for all of the calls under the 2024 work program, and how that is distributed between the different grant schemes? Is there anything new to flag for this year?
Sure. I will go through the budget distribution first. The total budget in the work program is 2.2 billion. Okay, it's slightly higher than the one the previous year, but we have to keep in mind that we have always additional budget coming from associated countries. We expect a first chunk of this of around 120 million on top of this 2.2 billion. But the good news that probably many of you have here in the press lately is that UK finally will be associated for Work Program 2024, which means that we will have an additional amount coming from the contribution from UK. Still, we don't know what it will be the final exact amount, but we estimate that will be an additional 300-400 million. So in total, we will be over 2.5 billion for 2024 work program. How it is distributed? Well, first, let me say that our experience in synergy grant is that there is high demand, and the budget allocated in the previous year has been revised to cope with this high demand, and has been increased significantly from 300 million to 400 million. Okay, so this is the call that has had a bigger impact regarding the budget distribution. For the others, for starting, consolidator, and advance, the rest of the funding is distributed more or less equally among the 3. Here, the approach that the Scientific Council follows is to try to predict the success rate, which is difficult because you don't know how many applications you are going to get. But okay, based on historical data, we try to do a prediction and aiming to have a similar success rate for the 3 mono-beneficiary calls, starting consolidators and advance. Another novelty related to the budget, the calls, is that the proof of concept will have only 2 cutoff dates instead of 3, as in the past. And also another important piece of information related to the budget, that we have allocated 60,000 euros for the biennial public engagement with research award. Okay, that will be running in the link to the Work Program 2024. So this is a very broad summary of the budget distribution.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much to both of you. We're going to turn now to the questions. We received a couple in advance, but they're now coming quite quickly also in the chat from our online audience live. Perhaps I can just start off, Angela, with you. We've had a couple of questions. Some of our observant viewers have noticed that in the text of the 2024 work program, the words high risk and high gain no longer appear. So we had a question from Mariana Rutin and also online from Sofia Xenofontos. Sorry, yes, exactly, yes, Sofia. So can you just explain, for anybody who might have noticed that, if there's any significance to the fact that those words are not in the work program this year?
Sure. Well, thank you, Marianne and Sophia. Be reassured that frontier research is somehow, by definition, taking risks. So the risk element is embedded and continues to be so by supporting frontier research. The reason why the Scientific Council had long discussions, also based on panel members' feedback, is that sometimes this relation between high risk and high gain is very difficult to determine. First of all, because the research is risky, by definition, definition, it's very difficult to predict whether the gain will be very high. Secondly, for example, in an economist panel, they will tell you, but why should we dump proposal if the gain is going to be very, very high and the risk is low? This is optimal, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, people in life sciences and physics and engineering also might think the same. So the Scientific Council decided that we keep the risk because it's inherent in frontier research. But rather than having the panel struggling on how do we determine the relation between being high risk and high gain, the notion now is to say it should be leading to breakthrough, should be ambitious. And of course, also feasible, as Jose reminded. And this also takes care of the risk dimension in terms of when you take risk in research, when you want to go for breakthrough, of course, you need to be aware of certain, risk management options. What I do if an experiment failed? Do I do something else? Or if a field work is impossible because of a war or a seismic risk or whatever. But this is simply normal part of the planning of research. So I hope that response is satisfactory and clear.
Okay, thank you. Then Mariana Rutin had a second question, a bit more technical. She noted that the funding ID annex has moved from section B1 to B2, which means that it's available for the reviewers only at the second stage of the evaluation. Is there any particular significance to that, Jose?
Well, not a particular significance, but there's more practical reason for doing this. The purpose of asking for the funding ID is to identify potential overlaps of the research that the PI is proposing with other grants funding something that could be similar. This is important for the assessment of the panel about when they assess the full scientific proposal, because they could add questions in the interview if they see that there are other projects that they have some overlap. And also, well, is for the granting phase, it's also important to try to avoid double funding. But it was never really used in the past to assess the PI, okay? It was more for these practical purposes. So somehow in B1, it was a bit disturbing because it was not playing much of a role. And now we put it in the right place, that is in part B2.
Yeah. Then we had a question in advance as well from Dr. J.T. Berman, who asks whether there are any particular benefits or drawbacks of submitting early or late in a program when there's 5 years of eligibility for starting and consolidated grants. Is there any evidence of older applicants being more successful? So people who are more senior in the kind of eligibility window. So what does
very good
past
question, and
us?
actually a quite frequent one, I must say.
Yeah.
So, well, what we saw by now, in almost 50 years of applications, is that we see a bit of a lower success rate in the beginning of starting grants. This is probably because this is the first time really of applying to a significant grant after PhD and related work, since, as we know, starting grants is 2 years after PhD. So at the very beginning of the starting grant, the success rate is a bit lower, but then it is quite flat in the rest of the period. And then we know many applicants are quite worried in the transition between being a starting grantee and becoming consolidator grantee, or between consolidator and advanced. And we do not see significant changes in success rate. It remains quite flat. So if you are moving from being eligible for starting grant to being eligible for consolidator, or from consolidator to advance, no fear. There is no evidence, at least as of now, that this the people in the younger cohort of those schools are penalized.
Yeah. Okay. All right, moving to the online questions, and there are really a lot. So as I say, we'll try to get through as many as possible. There are a couple of around career breaks. Chiara Gabby asks, for those with an unconventional career path, are the years off from science counted to assess the eligibility? And Stefano Fedeli asks, do the requirement of a maximum number of years from the PhD discussion consider career breaks outside of academia?
The answer is no.
No.
This is a context, as Jose explained. The notion is not to penalize people who might have been doing other, let's say, services to the community, or, for example, who had career breaks. But really, the diverse career paths is about other things in life that people might be doing. I don't know, being surgeon in the war zones, humanitarian affairs, or being in building databases for the good of the rest of the scientific community, and not doing your own research for a little while, or this kind of things. So this is context, but it's not an eligibility extension. The eligibility extension are quite clear, and this is about maternity leaves, parental leaves, also by fathers. I would like to emphasize that. And long-term illness, I would like to emphasize, under long-term illness is also the issue of disability, even if we acknowledge that disability is not an illness. And major natural hazards, your laboratory or field work were impossible for access for a while, so that part can be documented and so on, or seeking asylum. Which, of course, with the multiple refugee crisis we have been experiencing, has been considered, and they were introduced in Work Program 23. But the diverse career paths is not.
Okay. Then we have a question on the call calendar. Ludmila Suchkova asks whether we can explain the reasons for shifting the deadline dates, particularly for consolidator and advanced grants, compared to previous work programs. I think to a certain extent we're back to a more normal calendar now, because initially there was some shifts due to the late start of the Horizon Europe program. But is there anything else we could
exactly.
say on
I
that?
think in the transition from framework program Horizon 2020 to Horizon Europe, this was not approved, let's say, on time to be able to launch all the calls with our standard calendar. They were all shifted. So we needed 3 years to shift them back in time or in the calendar to reach the normal setting. Okay, and we are reaching this in 2024. Okay, so that's the reason when you compare to the previous one is because still we were in the shifting process. Let's say. Okay.
Yeah. So there are a couple of questions about this magic number 44, passing from step 1 to step 2. Amir asks whether we'd considered in the PE6 panel, with all of the developments around AI, had we considered whether the number 44 is the right one? I suppose that's a more general question about whether that panel will receive a lot of proposals in future calls. But then, I mean, also Sheila Vidal asks only 44 candidates will go to step 2 after step 1. She asks if that's a correct understanding. I think it's a maximum of 44, isn't it? Not automatically 44. But anyway, would you like to comment?
So first of all, let's start with yes, it's not automatic. Any panel can decide to send fewer applicants to step 2. It's really a matter of quality. So, and especially now that we have the new category of A, not invited, panels are really invited not to free ride. I mean, they should not send somebody for interview if they don't think this is really, somebody who should get an interview, because if it is excellent but not as excellent to have an interview, they can still go to, being an A not invited and not incur the penalty of resubmission, which was sometimes also, thinking about not penalizing FEI by sending for interview when there was capacity. So it's not automatic. Yes, it's the maximum. The maximum, and P6 has a large number of proposals indeed. But there are many other panels, particularly in physical sciences and engineering, and in social sciences and humanities, but also LS7 in life sciences that have 180, 170, whatever, particularly starting grants. So this issue is really a capping that is done to avoid that with many more interviews, And I must say, anyhow, the maximum interviews we ever had, and it was, I think, during COVID when we could still use even the weekend because people were not in Brussels. So if they were generous to give more time, even during the weekend, we could. When we had more interviews, so that was in COVID, or in another case, we did split some panel, for example, in SH, I don't remember in P, I think also in PE, we had to split the panel to cope with the interviews, which is not optimal. But anyhow, the maximum we went was 50 something. So it's not that we go 44 from, I don't know, 60 or more that could have been done or were ever done in the past. So this is really to make sure that each and all proposal and each application that goes has been evaluated properly, and that during the interviews, really the time for the interview and the time to discuss the results of the interview and ranking is done properly. Because doing things in a rush and interviews is really the most sensitive time for the procedure, including the time sensitivity. You cannot delay interviews because or have interviews at 9 p.m. in any time zone and really be fresh, both for the applicant and for the panel.
We have a series of questions from Diego Armando Badillo, who apparently is considering applying for a starting grant. Some of them are quite detailed, but maybe we can give Diego some tips. He asks, how detailed must be the description of the budget for the cost of purchasing new instruments? This is for a starting grant. Does the ERC cover taxes for the acquisition of new instruments? Does the budgeting cover mobility help for staff from non-EU countries and visas, resident permit documentation? Is the proposal penalized if the PI has no further grants or applications, so nothing to declare in Part B2? And what is covered by the indirect costs? So I don't know how much detail we can go into on that individual case. I mean, those questions may be of more general interest, but perhaps at least some elements of response.
Shall I start? And hopefully you can complement.
Yes.
So, okay, this is for starting grants. So this is the detailed dimension are necessary for advanced grants, do not really apply here. So personal cost must be there. If there is equipment, some sense of depreciation can be there. If it is not there, will be anyhow part of the actual cost and so on. So not to worry. Taxes, I think that we need somebody from the granting department, but there are also different regulations in different countries. So
maybe we can provide an answer in writing on that
one.
That.
Mobility, yes. I mean, if you have visiting researchers in your university laboratory or whatever, wherever they come from, if they need to work with you on the project, the mobility is, meaning the travels can be part of the budget. Now, connecting with what Jose said about the ID, funding ID. As it was explained, this was never intended anyhow to be part of the evaluation of the excellence of the PI, let alone in starting grant when people are just starting. So ERC can be the first application I do, or can be one of very few at the beginning, we assume. So no, there is no penalty. In fact, it's completely agnostic. As Jose explained, it's more for the proposal in case the panel wants to be reassured about, non-overlap or incrementality or novelty or whatever, and then in granting about double granting and indirect cost, yes.
Yeah, the indirect cost is for the host institution to decide what how to spend that money.
Okay, I have a question from Eric Dujardin, which is more on advanced grants and lump sums. Eric asks, with regard to the PI salary, does the lump sum logic mean that a 40% time involvement of the PI does not necessarily imply that 40% of the salary cost is requested? Don't know if we can answer
No,
that
this
one.
is something really that it pertains to the PI and the host institution. I mean, there are, cases where even for national regulation, people cannot, put the full salary in a grant because they are paid by the university. In other cases, they can put whatever percentage they wish because they can dedicate themselves fully to the research and, for example, not teaching or no other things and so on and so forth. So this is actually quite variable. So the time commitment must be there, and the percentage is, in fact, for advance is 30%, but as a minimum.
Exactly,
but of course, we hope even more. And this doesn't change. I mean, the lump sum doesn't change the logic. The commitment is the commitment to the research. What is charged should be reasonable. Maybe the only other, the difference maybe with advanced grants is that we will have colleagues in the granting department can provide the panel members with historical statistics of how much a salary is in a certain country and institution, so that people do not. And we had cases in the past where people had, normally a salary of, 10 in a specific host institution, and were asking ERC for a salary of 20. And then the panels would actually say, oh, that seems to be extremely, onerous. And for that, the panel for advance, because this will be one of the cost categories to be assessed in terms of reasonable cost, will have this information. Again, this is an information, is not a standard, a rigid thing. So play that wisely.
Okay. There's a related question actually on salaries. Anna Pereira Rodas asks, you mentioned the 30% minimum.
For advanced.
For advanced, yeah. The question is about advanced. But is there a maximum? She's asking, can the candidate in the advanced grant request the full salary for the 5 years of the grant agreement?
Yes. And they can spend 100% of their time in an ERC grant. They're most welcome to do so if they can and they wish. But they cannot do 120%. Well, we have also those cases.
Some might argue that they work 120%, but they can't get paid for 120%. There's another question related to what we ask in the application form. Kartik Jain asks, why is the question to reviewers about novel methodology removed from evaluations?
Yes. Well, this, in fact, is one of the changes in the questions for the reviewers. The reason behind is that, in general, this is not applicable to let's say, all the proposals. I mean, the fact that there is not a novel methodology doesn't imply something negative, because the project could be executed without a novel methodology. So the council decided to remove this part. Of course, novel methodology is welcome, and this can be,
even if it's not explicitly
explained in the proposal that involve these methodologies, and this will be assessed. But since many of them, didn't have it and always created this, is this obligatory to have novel methodology? And our briefing to the panels was no. Finally, the council decided to remove it.
Okay. Areti Damala is a bit concerned to know whether there might be, or whether there is likely to be synergy grants in the following work program, so in the 2025 work program, because it's true that there was a year where there weren't synergy grants, but that was in the transition, if I recall, between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe. So would it be reasonable to assume, I mean, we still have to have the discussion, obviously, with the Scientific Council about the following work program, but could people reasonably assume that there would be synergy grants for 2025 as well?
I would say synergy is here to stay. This is a message to all. It's a very successful granting scheme. It's the reason why SKIP 1 was more operational. Because in the transition between framework programs, the calendar was so tight that it was impossible to accommodate one of the calls, and we decided to skip synergy at that time. Let's hope this will not happen in the transition to the next framework program, that the legislator approve it on time. But yes, synergy is here to stay.
Synergy is here to stay.
I don't foresee any, let's say, concerns in the Scientific Council to revise this funding scheme to the level to not run it again in 25.
Right.
And maybe
Okay.
we can actually add to what Jose said earlier about success rate. Synergy was given more budget in the last call because the success rate, given to the success in terms of applications, our prediction was not accurate enough in terms of the number of submissions, was such that the success rate was below 9%. Now, anything below 10% is almost considered a lottery. We know that we aim in the future framework program, hopefully, to have 15% as the success rate, because literature tells us that below that we lose excellence. Some excellent proposal clearly get ruled out. So, considering that now with this budgetary allocation, we still don't reach 10% of success rate in synergy. So success rate in synergy is actually somehow lower than in the main individual grants. But still, the recognition is that the Scientific Council wanted to give the signal that this is an important scheme, and this is why the budget was increased to try to improve the success
was
rate.
Increased significantly, 25% from 300 to 400. So
Yes.
yeah. So it's a very clear signal.
I've got a couple of questions here from João Frade, who's based in Vienna, about the panels. He asked, well, two questions. Firstly, are cross-panel applications historically less likely to be funded? I don't know if we have any data on that. Or, and can applications be shifted to another panel by the panel chair after application? And does this create some kind of red flag? So can you reassure João about those kind of applications?
First, cross-panel applications are always possible, and the applicants are asked whether they want to identify only one panel or also a secondary panel. In terms of success, what we noticed was that there is actually a bit of a lower success rate in the first step, but then the success rate increases in the second step. So apparently, cross-panel proposals, I don't say interdisciplinary proposals, because interdisciplinary proposals can also be within panels, particularly in the very multidisciplinary ones, but cross-panel proposal apparently need to be more persuasive in the step one to show that they are really doing something interesting and innovative by putting together different fields. But apparently when they go to step two, they are able to convince that this is actually quite interesting and innovative, and have a better success rate at step two. So I would say, don't be discouraged about having something cross panels, but think that in the step one you have to be quite explicit about why that matters, why it's new or interesting and feasible eventually. But then in step two, be encouraged. If it goes, the success rate is not only lower, but is actually quite good. Yes, proposal can be transferred. This is written in the work program, so this is known information to everybody. We, in the 98 or 7 whatever percent of cases, we follow fully what the applicants are saying. This is the panel I submit to. However, the panel chair of that panel, plus the panel chair of another panel that the initial panel might think have more expertise in a field, can jointly decide. It's no them, they have to jointly say, yes, the proposal fits best, can be best evaluated in another panel. In that case, it is transferred. Normally during the transfer, however, one or two, or normally not more, evaluators from the initial panel are asked to provide cross-panel reviews. We also have cross-panel reviews for proposals that are not changing the initial allocation, but might have elements that can be best addressed by having cross-panel reviews from other panels. And this is, again, agreed by the two panel chairs.
Okay. A couple of questions still on lump sums. One is, we've already provided a lot of information, I think, including in today's webinar. We have the Q&A document online, but we have a question, will we be doing any more information, perhaps a specific session on lump sums in the run-up to the opening of the call next year? perhaps that's something we should discuss. But I think our scientific council certainly encouraged us to share the information as widely as possible. So
this is in the plan. I mean, we are aware that this being the first call, and for the time being, I can also anticipate any other question. For the time being, it's not foreseen that it will be extended to other calls. Of course, the scientific council can change, but this is called a pilot. So we also need to see how it goes with the applications and so on. And this is also why it's with advanced grantees who have more experience, both in the host institution and as applicants themselves. But we still know it's quite new. So we have indeed planning for more information coming up, also considering that now it's information about all the work program 24, but when we are closer to the time of the deadlines of this year for the mono-beneficiary calls, the other mono-beneficiary calls plus synergy, then we can divide more effort for the people who are. But I would say from the scientific point of view, it doesn't change. So for the scientific point of view, all the points that were made earlier about research assessment, keeping excellence as the only criterion, organizing the proposal, it says it's a one-word package. One-word package simply means that we don't want to split a project into different lump sum depending on the financial work packages. So it's really as it was before. The science is as it should be and all be, meaning it's frontier research. So go ahead with your ideas, with your science and so on. When it comes to the budgetary implication and so on, in addition to the guidance that were offered already in the frequently asked question, the work program, and this webinar, surely there will be more dedicated one with the national contact points.
Exactly,
maybe
I was going to mention the
webinar,
and
we are also getting feedback also from other parts of the research community, because this is also applied to collaborative research, where it is admittedly more complicated, because when you have more multi-beneficiary, splitting the lump sum can be a bit more daring than doing so when it is one mono-beneficiary, one person and team, and one host institution. So go ahead with the science first, which should be the mantra, and the rest will be.
This should be a very clear message for people that would apply to advanced grant. Okay, the scientific aspects are identical. Okay, to the previous calls. This didn't change at all. There will be some changes in the budgeting, but not only for the application, also for the implementation of the project. Okay?
Still on lump sums, you mentioned that it's a pilot for the advanced grants. There is a question whether we will ask for some kind of feedback from member states, from host institutions. So there will be a kind of evaluation of this pilot experience with the advanced grants.
It's a pilot. Right? I said it's a pilot, and we are very cautious here. We're starting with one funding scheme. Okay, we will see, we will assess. All feedback is very welcome. Okay, because at some point the council will have to decide whether or not to extend this lump sum approach to other funding schemes.
Okay. We've got a couple of kind of somewhat provocative questions from Brian O'Shea, who says, why would the ERC make all applicants complete the 14-page B2 section if so many are getting rejected at B1? It seems like a waste of energy for people who are already stretched. And then he adds, would a two-part application process not make more sense, so that those who are successful at B1 get 2 months or longer to submit for B2?
Okay, well, there are 2 points in this, and thanks for the provocative question, which is not provocative, it's actually very useful. One is pure share logistics. Well, speaking about time, if you have to submit a full proposal in a very short time frame, because we cannot change the evaluation calendar for the issues that we discussed earlier with Jose about how tight it is, in order to be able to have all calls of ERC able to be used by applicants who can choose among them, then the complaint would be, oh, but there is not enough time to do a proper job once we have the result of step one. And, since we have that constraint, it's better to do things properly when you have the time available in front of you. We also heard, maybe it's not your experience, but it's the experience certainly of others, is that very often they start with the part B2, that is the full proposal, and then they synthesize in the part B1, which is supposed to be a self-standing document, but a self-standing document that takes element from, for example, we don't ask details of the methodology in B1, but B1 needs to give certain reassurance to the panel members that the scientific approach which is being used is sound. Now, if you still don't know which methodology you want to use in part B2, then maybe the confidence you can provide on the scientific approach in part B1 will be not very strong. So it's just to say that there are different ways, of course, of approaching an application. And we also heard from many people in the scientific community that actually they start the other way. So they would definitely do the full jumbo thing, and 15 pages as compared to other applications is quite a restrained kind of thing.
I'm told we still have 1,200 people watching us. So if Jose and Angela, you still have the energy, can we continue for another 5 or 10 minutes, because we still have a few questions to get through. So we have two viewers asking about the transition between starting and consolidated grants. So Marco Saliano says, can someone who didn't get the starting grant in step 2 be competitive for the consolidated grant if they then fall out of the 2 to 7 year eligibility window for starting grant? What are their chances in consolidated grant? And then there's Onelia Bertrand, who has a similar question about whether basically the same project can then be resubmitted for consolidator, or should it be more ambitious?
Well, the answer is clearly yes. Okay, yes. I mean, as Angela explained before, as answering the previous question, what we observe in consolidator grants is that the success rate, is quite flat. In the window of 5 years. Whether you apply your first year eligibility or the 4 years. So the chances, well, this formally are basically the same. So I would say, so keep in mind that, starting and consolidator, they are almost identical funding schemes, in the sense that we are looking for groundbreaking projects, all these features of these projects, but we had to split it in 2 tranches, for operational purposes, Back in 2009, 8, well, they worked together, with smaller window, but basically it was they were all together, and but yes, there's continuity. So if you had a proposal that was in step 2, and even you didn't get funding, I think the chances to apply to consolidators in your first year in the window are very similar to the chances you have if you apply in the 4 year starting and to the 5. So there is a lot of continuity in what we see in the profile of the people, and as I said, our statistics show that the success rate in the 5 years of the consolidator grants is quite flat.
Maybe one point, however, to be added, well, without however, one point to be added is consider that every competition is a competition in itself.
In its own right.
Meaning you will be submitting to a different panel and to a different context of competition. So we have sometimes applicants who say, "Oh gosh, but I got a B at step 2, and in another call, even in another year, maybe even in the same call." So the transition, as Jose and I repeated, is not the issue. The point is the proposal itself and the panel. When I say, well, I scored better the previous time than the second, this will depend maybe by the time. The same proposal after 1 year might be less competitive than it used to be if it is exactly the same, or can be that in the context of that particular panel, whether the same or a different reconfiguration of the panel, there might be other proposals that are even stronger or less strong than that one. So think that each time is a competition, but the point is not moving from start into consolidator. The chances is, statistically speaking, as Jose said, are the same. But don't be surprised if the response is different. It's different panels in a different context.
Yeah. Okay, just a very quick factual question. Luca Capaldo asks whether it's possible to combine an individual, so single PI grant with a synergy grant. Is it possible to hold two grants at the same time? No. And the answer is no. Okay. Perhaps a last question on lump sums. Sheila Vidal asks, so the candidates only need to provide a number, meaning the total requested funding. And then she asks, is this an HFSP budget? And I have to confess, I do not know what an HFSP budget is. But I think the basic question is, do you just need to give the total number?
No. The total number is the request for the grant, which is the same as for any budget we always have. But in the budget table, one will have to have the details, as mentioned earlier, about personnel cost. And the personnel cost needs also to be disentangled with categories of personnel. And in the case of equipment, the amount given for the equipment, as well as the depreciation cost, which is calculated by the host institution according to their rules. So it's not just, this is the number I want, can you give me, take the money and run? Well, no, I mean, the panel members need to have more, more basis, as it is the case already now, but with those two specifications in addition, about the fact that the number of the estimated cost is based on a breakdown, which seems to make sense with regard to the research to be addressed.
Okay.
And just to be totally clear, additional budget in all the calls, including in advanced grant with the lump sum method, the plus 1 million, which people can apply as additional budget, is also part of the lump sum if it is requested.
I was wrong. There is one additional question on lump sums. Perhaps let's make that.
I leave it to Jose.
Let's make this the last question, because I think we're already over an hour now. So we will try to pick up any last few questions and send written responses. But let's take this as the last one. So Chang Tan asks, how will the minimum time commitment of the PI be checked in the case of lump sums for advanced grants, since there'll no longer be any time sheeting, as you explained, I think, earlier?
Well, there will be no financial reporting apart from the last request for payment, but there will be scientific monitoring and scientific reporting. So in the scientific reporting, it will somehow appear whether the principal investigator took the grant and left it to somebody else to implement, or whether the principal investigator is actually principal investigating with their team. So this is, of course, based on trust, not on timesheets. But as any researchers know, and you explain what research was done, what difficulties, what progress, what publications, what data sets, what books, what art exhibitions, whatever was done, and somehow who did it. And if there are, for example, postdoc or PhDs, somebody supervising them. So these are the kind of things that will be reported in a scientific report. So it's not, and I think part of the questions are coming from the fear or hope, I don't know, that this is a blank check. No, this is trust-based, and it's a sort of simplified, once it comes to payment, model. But this is based on the, integrity is one of the principles in the research community, and ERC is based on the notion that people will, and we are sure they will, scientists and host institution, give the information and work on the basis of the information they provide. And of course, there is flexibility, there can be changes during a lump sum in advance grant, as for the other grants in actual cost model. So nothing to fear about that. Portability also applies.
Right.
Just to be sure that this is also a point of reassurance for everybody. So it's not a blank check, but hopefully it's more simple.
Yeah.
We are having it as a pilot because we said we will see if it is as simple as we hope, and we will get the feedback.
And as we said before, the monitoring of the scientific technical part is the same as we do now. Okay, this will not change.
Okay, thank you so much to Angela and Jose for taking the time. It's been a bit Russian roulette with all of these questions coming live, but I think you've done your very best to answer all of the questions our viewers had. There may be one or two still in the chat that we didn't manage to get to, so sorry for that, but we will try to pick them up and post replies in writing. As we said at the beginning, there's a lot of information available online as well, the text of the work program itself, the Q&A on lump sums, so that's all available. We'll make the recording of this webinar available as well, so for anybody who wasn't able to join us live, that will be available for people to catch up. And also our national contact points, we'll make sure that they have all of the relevant information, and they're a very good first port of call for anybody who might be considering preparing an application for an ERC grant. So the contact details of all our NCPs are available also on the website. And one final thing, I think we noted in the discussion that there are still several questions around lump sums, so perhaps we'll think of another moment before the launch of that call in May next year to have a specific session for people who may be preparing applications for that. So thanks again for tuning in, for following us live, and also anybody who might be watching this in a recorded version, catching up afterwards. Thanks for your interest, and thanks again to Angela and Jose for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay.